Recording.
Yes. All right, sweet. So I'm able. How? I've never done this before. Do I just share my screen?
Mhm.
You can click the green share screen button.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see.
And just make sure your mics are off with when other people are presenting. That's about it.
Okay. Let me know if y'all can see.
You're good.
You're good.
Y'all can see everything right here.
Yes, sir.
All right, sweet. All right. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Danny, and my group and I, Wasim and Christian, are going over overview of cybersecurity in the banking industry. So, why did we choose our topic? Well, our motivation is that for all of us working, it's important that the integrity of the banking security is top notch, meaning that we don't want to wake up tomorrow and see $0 in our balance. It's very important that this sector of security is top notch. We want it to work all the time, absolutely no flaws, or else they become very expensive. So the objectives for our final project: one, we want to report on the different methods used to protect the bank's information. And two, we want to report on the different methods hackers use to infiltrate bank security. On the third, we want to discuss findings on what improvements are being made to protect the bank's information. So it's all pretty straightforward. So different methods the banks use to protect the information. One is strong encryption. It's important that data encryption is implemented to make sure that no one can see customer assets, anyone from the outside. But not just data encryption is implemented. It's also important to make sure that all secure communications from client and server is encrypted as well. Any digital asset, it doesn't matter if it's not viewed as important or not, needs to be encrypted. No chance of that leaking anywhere out. So fraud protection software. So Bank of America uses a thing called Trusteer, which is like a fraud protection. It protects you from like key logging and phishing, and we'll go over that later. This is all very broad. We're not going to dive too deep into this. It's just a basic overview of everything that we want to talk about today. So digital certificates, like the certificates in the Google browser, you want to make sure that your websites, you don't want to use a fake website to log in your bank information in. Like Intrust and VeriSign, they're third-party companies that employ third-party certificates. So that's pretty important as well. And last, biometrics like facial recognition, fingerprint. Since we're moving more towards on the mobile side of things, it's very important that we can implement those in order to personify your account and make sure that nobody else can get into your account only but yourself. All right. And then Christian.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Christian, and I'm going to be going over the methods that cyber criminals utilize in order to get a hold of your information, our information, to get any sort of monetary or tangible compensation. So according to the IC3, which is the Internet Crime Complaint Center, a subdivision of the FBI, there's been an increasing trend over the years, specifically from 2001 to present day, on cyber crimes, on financial institutions, but especially on individuals. And these have resulted in billions of dollars lost. One key factor that has fueled this number to go higher in the last 2 years is the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we know, COVID-19, the pandemic, it has changed the way we do business, the way we interact among each other and among public or private institutions. These key factors has, like I said, fueled a surge in cyber attacks, especially on individuals. The way this has affected that is because since everything is remote, online, over the phone, there is a lot of phishing inquiries on individuals, and especially on individuals. Institutions have a higher level of security towards that, but given that scenario, I want to talk to you about something, just a little, sneak peek on what the main, deeper subject is. Cyber criminals, they create an identity profile puzzle. It's called a puzzle, which is that many times the fraud doesn't happen all together all at once, in a single hit. Many times what occurs is that over the course of multiple phishing emails, phone calls, cyber criminals are able to get a hold of little pieces of information, and at the end, by gathering a big amount of data, they're able to then impersonate that person to either do credit card, debit card frauds, loans, or even tax frauds. So my specific focus in this subject is going to be specifically to phishing, what techniques and what to look for when for the hackers or cyber criminals to the angle of attack that they utilize to get a hold of these things. At the same time, my focus implies on what to do and what not to do when looking at these situations. So moving forward to...
Hello, everyone. This is Wasim. I'm going to be talking about ways that can improve cybersecurity towards financial institutions. There's a lot of ways that I've read, but I just picked what I think is important and actually makes sense. The first one is investment in strong endpoint security. And before I did any research on this one, I actually had to look up and see if ATM hijacking is still a thing. Like, when was the last time there was an ATM hijacking? And apparently it's still a thing. Last time there was one was like 2 months ago, something like that. Obviously we need, like, banks really try to avoid, they have a lot of money, but they also try to avoid putting that money into, like, security. One other thing I'm going to talk about is AI. Lack of using AI in banks. Like, they don't use it as much as they're supposed to. But obviously, like, investing in strong endpoint security is better credit card readers. I'm sure a lot of you guys use Apple Pay. When Apple Pay first started, it was only, all you had to do was put your bank number and the CCIV and the date, expiration date, and all that, and boom, you could use that card. And a lot of stuff and, like, hacking happened with that, with people stealing cards and just adding them to their phone and using it. And then, like, ever since that happened, now to have Apple Pay, you have to actually log in your bank after you put your card number and details. And then implementation and maintenance of AI in banking institution. The one really main reason why they don't implement AI in banks as much as they're supposed to is because it's expensive. Like, to maintain it is very expensive. Along with, they have this fear with unemployment rate increasing when they implement AI, which I think, I mean, sure, there is some truth to that, but there's also balance. You can balance both, and you can make both work, just like anything else. For example, Tesla, they're self-driving. The only reason why it's so good is because every Tesla out on the road is actually taking data, every single road. Like, when you're driving a Tesla is taking data everywhere you go to make sure that they have a good map for when the full self-driving is out. That's just practice. You practice AI and you make it good. And then also another thing is assessing risk management and controls for third parties. Banks, again, they don't like they have so much money, but they don't like investing their money into good stuff that would actually help them. So banks they source a lot of third-party companies. They use them for software, security, camera system, apps. There's plenty of things they use third-party companies for. And one thing banks usually get scammed with from third-party companies, and that's all based on what research and what I've read and done from like sources. As they don't invest in third party properly. When I mean invest, I mean in like looking into doing their DD, their due diligence, their homework, making sure that third party is good, which is basically making sure their whatever algorithm they're using, whether it was for apps, software, whatever it was good. Make sure they're like go back to their history of their activities and how they manage their entities and risk their cyber risk, how they had them before, if they had any history of that, and so on and so forth. So those are like the three main stuff that really caught my attention. And like I said, there's a lot. There's like probably like 10 that I will be talking about on my project. And that's for improving bank cybersecurity. And then we're gonna go into like the significance of why it's important. Like one really like it's money at the end of the day. It's your money. You worked hard for it. It better be safe and secure. There's sweat and tears into that money. There's no reason for just one thing to go bad, for all that to go boom, done, it's gone. So also, we don't use cash as much these days. It's all either Venmo, especially with COVID and this pandemic. It's either Venmo, tapless pay, Cash App, and like cash is really not used as much. So this all going into apps, software, and your phone, like it just makes it even worse, because like that's literally all they need. Just a software will just take it down. It's all it takes. One little small software or malware, it's done. And I'm gonna push this and give it back to Christian to talk about the conclusion and our resources. Thanks for hearing.
Yes, so just to recap, the main focus of our project is going to be to provide a full perspective of where we stand as a society in terms of the layers of security currently implemented to protect us from these trends in cyber crimes. The most commonly used techniques that the cyber criminals utilize to exploit individuals and the vulnerabilities of institutions, and also ways to further better data and identity security on financial management systems. And most importantly, the key takeaway for you is how you can protect yourself and those close to you from this uptrending threat. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions about presentation?
I had a question. So the identity profile puzzle, that's like a very extravagant identity theft technique, it sounds like, right? Is that what?
Not really. Actually, one of the things I was gonna go over, more in depth on the actual final paper is a couple of case studies regarding that. Personally, my mother, she works at a bank, and this was actually done not too long ago within her department, where somebody or a group of people were calling, kind of asking something that looked kind of like not a threat or innocuous, but at the end, little by little, they were able to get tiny pieces of information such as zip code, age, and then if somehow, some way from another source, you're able to get something else like last four of your social, last couple of addresses where you lived, that is something that can compromise the integrity of the protection for your account with a bank. Because when you call a financial institution and you try to speak to them, hey, I want to increase the limit of my card, for example, they always do like a identity check. But these things, they usually consist of last four of your social, phone number associated with the account, your address, state your full name, stuff like that. So my banking financial the bank that I use, they actually have a pin that obviously will be kind of hard to get a hold of, but that's what the puzzle is about, is gathering information. It doesn't necessarily have to be just from the bank or from that place that you're trying to exploit, but it can be from somewhere else where there is a flow in place, and then you can utilize that. You can kind of like cross utilize the data on somewhere else of your interest.
Yeah, I see. Thanks for explaining that. That's interesting.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else?
Yeah, hit us with some questions.
You guys know the type of encryption that's going to be used?
On what? On banking?
Yeah, like, do you know what they use?
Yeah, it's AES 256 right now.
Yeah.
Many, I mean, just a trending instance.
And there's many more. It's not just that one, but I haven't delved too deep into that.
Yeah, but by the way, the 256 means like so like imagine like 2 to the 256th power, and that it kind of like gives you a perspective of how many possible combinations for the encryption key there is on that. So that's why I mean the higher the number, you see before it used to be like SSL 128 whatever it was, so it's 2 to the 128 encryption. So it's kind of a little bit easier to do, and then they use I know cyber criminals use something called brute force kind of like inference on like passwords and stuff, where you have some sort of algorithm running, doing many possible combinations. Obviously this can be mitigated with some sort of like password protection, attempts to lock the account after so many tries, but there's always a way to to get past that.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we do have to move on since we're a little bit over time, over 15 minutes.
Is the Q&A part of the presentation?
I thought we had an extra 5 because we only have 4 groups. I think we could have an extra. If there's another question, I think we could do one more because we have time.
Yeah, it's a
We have 2
total of
hours.
15 max 15 max minutes, and then 5 minutes for Q&A at max.
There you go.
Okay, because I had
I see.
one more question.
Yeah, go for it, Alex.
Yeah, I was interested in more about how AI plays a role in the protection of like credentials. Like how is AI going to protect passwords or protect account information more as opposed to previous methods that are being used?
They're also more able to identify fraud in transactions also. So that's what they would implement them more towards fraud and money laundering, because they can tell suspicious, when you train AI suspicious activity, it will tell and detect suspicious activity way faster than a human will. And also humans are not, there's not like a person watching everyone's bank account to make sure there's no suspicious activity. Like it happens when a dispute is made, when it could be like tax from government that they tell, and they have to go through bank logs and how much money this guy's making and depositing, and then they go through it. AI really cuts all that off. Once it happens, it'll detect it. And then it'll ping bankers, they'll go through it, whether it's right or wrong. That won't matter at first, because that's the whole point of having AI practice, just to make it good, to make it like efficient and accurate. But again, I said they don't do that because it's expensive. It's high maintenance to do all that. And also here, I was also reading this article, is it also prevents cyber crimes. Like they could put AI fraud detection systems where a cyber crime, when, it's all about time. When cyber crime happens, it's all time, like when a bank goes down and you have people's money online, like time plays a big role in it. But say you have an AI-based like fraud detection system, which is practiced and knows, banks know how cyber crimes and fraud happen. All they got to do is train that AI and tell the AI of how it happens. And then AI is able to detect it way faster. And again, time is important. So it'll save them a lot of money and time if they could actually implement it like 100%. Like they do have it. It's not like they don't use it. It's just they don't use it as much and they don't implement it on as many things. Again, because of high cost and unemployment rate, basically, they have this thought of unemployment rate increasing when implementing a lot of AIs.
I have a concrete example I would like to add to that. Also, like, are you ever have you ever traveled and then like travel like plus 1,000 miles or something like that, and then your car declines or something? This is, I mean, you might not think it about, you might not think about it as AI, but that's a simple algorithm, because obviously there's no one watching your account to see.
Right. So it's there, but they don't have it on a lot of things.
Yeah,
they definitely do use it. They do use AI for a lot of things, but it could be implemented.
It's time to move on, guys.
Yeah, we have to move on.
It's time to move on.
All right.
Good question.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, now my group is going to go next.
Sounds good.
Good afternoon. Our team is Geek Squad, and our team members are Rohanna, Marco, and Kieran. Today we'll be talking about network security infrastructure. Next slide, please. As more people gain access to internet capabilities, this only widens the pool of people that can be exposed to cyber attacks. We'll focus on large-scale corporations in our literature review. We were inspired via the pipeline cyber attacks, as it made us consider the makeup of network security and also explore possible solutions to prevent similar events. We could see that these impacts were widespreading through the United States. Gas prices skyrocketed due to the shortages in the supplies. Also, I'd like to quickly introduce some other side effects of cyber attacks. We have compromised personal data, money being stolen from accounts, and possible ransom scenarios. Next slide, please. We touched briefly on data breaches and compromised data, but we'll also explore right now why it's so significant. Data breaches can risk information on both the client and the user side, and this may lead to personal information such as social security, birthday, and other sensitive information being leaked. In terms of a larger scale, companies might have information about projects, strategies, and other things leaked into a public forum, and that can put the project's integrity at risk. Next slide, please. There are many types of cyber attacks, but we'll only be focusing on the 3 that we think are the most common. I'll be talking about denial of service, Mark will be talking about phishing, and Kieran will be talking about ransomware. We hope to find that these attacks happen due to a similar weakness in the infrastructure of the network. That way our solution can be broad-reaching and not only apply to one type of attack. I'll hand it over to Kieran. She'll talk about problems and also our objective.
Hey guys, so I'm going to be talking about 4 different types of problems that we found synonymous with these types of attacks. So we're talking about this on a business scale. So the first problem is a lack of high-level strategy. And this occurs when a business doesn't really have a good strategy in place for their cybersecurity needs. And this can be caused by a lack of funding. They don't think it's a big problem, or they may already have a strategy in place, but it's not combating the issues that they want to combat. The next issue is an unsecured network. So if you access a unsecure Wi-Fi network, this gives a hacker a gateway to access everything, all the systems that are connected on that network. And this can lead to a lot of data on the business side and on the user side to be potentially compromised. Another issue is that some businesses might have outdated systems. And if these systems are no longer able to receive software updates with patches that can help mitigate against new and evolving cyber attacks, these systems are more susceptible to cyber attacks. And our last problem is a lack of monitoring. So if we have not a good monitoring system for what's going in and out of the network traffic, and there's no alerts to see if something like an attack or something is happening, this causes a business once again to be more vulnerable to cyber attacks. Next slide, please. Now that we've given an overview of the issue at hand, each of us will go over a type of cyber attack further on in the presentation, and afterwards we will provide an innovative solution to help mitigate these attacks. Next slide.
Okay, my name is Marco, and here we're gonna go over the preliminary literature review, which will cover the 3 most common types of attacks that we just talked about, which includes phishing, denial of service, and ransomware. Looking into phishing attacks, here basically, starting from phishing attacks, this is a type of social engineering attack that preys into the victim's psychology by a deception.
Marco, wrong side.
Through oh, my bad. through masquerading as a legitimate source. This phishing attack can come in as a normal looking message that will ask you for credentials, install software, or contain malicious links. The phishing comes in different forms of communications, normally that are like that are common towards us, such as texting, emails, or social media messages through Facebook, Instagram, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to head into denial of service.
With denial of service, it hinders the access of legitimate users as it targets the system and overflows the resources. We'll be talking about how the internet structure allows this to happen, as the reduced complexity leads to less security. We'll also talk about how IPF spoofing allows for the attackers to take on the IP address of legitimate users onto ransomware.
So giving a little background on ransomware, this is malware that encrypts a user's files on their system and holds the data against them. And the only way to get this data back is if the user pays a ransom to the hacker to get an unlock key. So this is usually caused if a user might accidentally use a fake application that appears to be non-fraudulent. They accidentally or they may purposely click on a email spam link, or they might unintentionally access a unsecured Wi-Fi network. Next slide.
Well, here on our proposed solution, we focus onto the technological demands. As we all noticed after the pandemic, we saw a large shift into telecommuting, which of course brings a new rapid demand on our current infrastructure. One possibility will be to use quantum computing in reference to mitigate these attacks. This type of computing uses qubits rather than bits, and these properties allow quantum computers to move information around and perform tasks quicker and more efficiently than ordinary computers. Therefore, the possibilities of quantum computing are therefore endless. Additionally, scientists will use the quantum computing to take artificial intelligence to new heights. Well, in the area of security, we can see that this tool can bring its own set of pros and cons shown below. As we just talked about, it can move information around much quicker than ordinary computers, and it can take AI to new heights, which of course will let us view into new trends that might pop up in the future. Then again, the cons will be that, as mentioned, that quantum computers can become available to the general public, and this can bring new challenges such as making the present-day encryption obsolete. So we have come up with a schedule into our work. As you can see here, we have 3 phases. The first phase will be research the material. And here, we're just going to focus on researching valid sources. Then on phase 2, we'll create our first draft of both the paper presentation. And lastly, on phase 3, our final phase, we'll make our final adjustments to both the presentation and the paper.
Just to summarize, we've talked about why we think our topic is important, why it's important to explore network infrastructure. We've also talked about the three main topics we'll be covering, such as phishing, ransomware, and denial of service. And we've also proposed a important solution to this, which is quantum computing.
This now concludes our presentation. If you guys have any questions, let us know. Thank you.
I have a question. What are ways to mitigate denial of service threats?
Say again.
Reducing denial of service threats. So through initial reading, we've come up with filtering or rate limiting. We've also got capability-based response, like the flow of congestion and things can prevent them from getting the resources all at once. That's just from our initial literature review readings.
Okay, but what about, but that's kind of like focusing towards like overflow of page requests, for example, for some sort of service online, right? Like imagine you were able to like break down a script that can like do like infinity page requests to this page, and then it just overflows the server and it just goes to hell, right? But what about if some cyber criminal is able to like get a hold, like infiltrate, and then he was able to somehow, some way manipulate the data to make it inaccessible for customers or the actual employees of that company? Then what are ways to meet, any ways of mitigating that?
Obviously, we just briefly getting into the topic, I think researching the mitigation and those processes more would come into our like actual literature review. We've only looked at it like those two reasons I gave you above. We don't have anything in that depth yet. So in terms of the proposal, that's all I can share right now.
Okay, no problem. I just wanted to try to expand my knowledge. Thank you.
I had a question about the quantum computing aspect. So let's say attackers get these quantum computers, can't they make the problem worse? Like, would you have to like fight against each other? How do you guys maybe think that would work? I know you guys haven't researched this, but maybe any thoughts on what if these two quantum computers fought at each other?
Right. So like, this is basically it's gonna be like the new race. Like since we first got like, this is like going back into the like in the early 2000s when there was like a huge bubble in tech, basically that when internet became mostly available to everybody. That's I believe this is gonna be it's gonna be yet another checkpoint that this will happen yet again. So what I've looked into is how to stay ahead with I read into how to stay ahead with how do you call this proprietary technology. Unfortunately, proprietary technology can be good and beneficial towards the actual owner, but not to everybody else. But that's going to be one way to maintain the edge for quantum computers. So like just having something like the way something is done be proprietary to someone, so nobody else can see it. But that is just one method among others in order to stay ahead of ahead of the game here, because yes, eventually this will come up, and I guess I will say that it will eventually level itself off like we are right now. Like let's not take quantum computing into consideration, just with the level of computing. So we're looking into that. That's something that will eventually happen in the future as well. But I believe that this is going to happen. The big corporations that have the money to fund this kind of research are going to have the edge first, and then eventually everybody's going to follow.
That's what you're saying. Thanks, Marco.
No problem. Anything else?
Guys, want to move on to the next one?
We can move on.
All right.
Let me share my screen 1 second. Okay. Right here. All right. Can you guys see these slides all right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Let me move this Zoom thing. 1 second, sorry. All right. Welcome to our presentation. Our topic is hardware security and memory technology, and my name is Adam Keller.
And my name is Fernando Oviedo.
So some motivation on why we chose this topic. First, so like if you had a software security, not a software security issue, you could easily roll out an update, right? We constantly get brigaded with Windows updates to fix these vulnerability issues in code and whatever. And so that's easy for software, but for hardware, we have to completely redesign and rebuild it. You have to send it out to each customer. It's a lot harder than just sending out, rolling out a patch or sending out a Windows update. Can't do that with hardware. Also, row hammering is an interesting attack that we started to look into that we're going to talk about later in the presentation. And of course, in our final report is going to be talked about greatly. It's what really made me interested in picking hardware security and memory technology because it's just a very cool exploit that uses JavaScript and hardware to actually perform a pretty nasty attack. It'd be really cool to see how to mitigate these security flaws to create a more secure piece of memory technology.
Yeah, not only that, also is very, very innovative as well. When it comes to the hardware security, it all depends on the amount of layers you have from an RNG, which is a random number generator. And then depending on how many levels you have for that particular hardware device, that increases the chances of actually having extremely potent and formidable hardware security and mitigate the chance of an attacker invading and taking all your personal data from that particular hardware device. And also finding different methods of devices for defense mechanisms for these particular hardware devices. We're going to go more in depth as far as when it comes to hardware security modules and what devices to use or implement to increase the actual hardware security. So there's multiple problems, of course, when it comes to hardware security. There is too many different attacks that there is, but we're going to focus on these four. The two that I'm focusing on is Meltdown and Spectre. So when it comes to Meltdown, it's actually an attack that exploits the out-of-order execution of a processor, primarily modern processors, and it reads the kernel memory and extracts vital information, whether it's your personal data or passcodes. It literally goes inside the kernel memory in the processor and bypasses any type of security without any type of permission, and it completely obliterates your memory from beginning to the end. Now, when it comes to Spectre, Spectre is extremely similar to Meltdown. The main difference between the two is that Spectre can attack you in wide variety of ranges, in which we're going to dive more into it on the next coming slides.
We also have Trojan attacks that specifically target SRAM chips, static RAM chips, which can actually lead to read, write, or memory retention failures, or even information leakage. So you can't read or write from memory, which is, I mean, that's the whole use of it, to put information there very fast and take it out very fast. You can't do that anymore. Information could be leaked. If you have any passwords or cookies, whatever you're storing in there, it could just completely get leaked to the attacker. So that's a huge security concern in memory. And also the rowhammer attack Smash that we talked about earlier. Smash is a synchronized many-sided rowhammer attack utilizing JavaScript. There was actually an article done on March 15th, 2021. So this is an ongoing issue that is persistent. It's attacking DDR4 DRAM chips. So this isn't something that just happened a long time ago. This is happening today. It's still affecting us. It's a rowhammer is a side channel attack that could lead to dangerous things such as bit flipping. And bit flipping could actually lead to root access into systems. So you could have your whole system taken over by this rowhammer attack.
As far as when it comes to the outcome for this research that we're doing, what we want to learn from it is actually what makes Intel, the processor, prone to both Meltdown and Spectre, and as well as what separates these attacks from each other as far as what is common between the four and what is actually a solution that can benefit all four if there is some common consensus between the four as far as the different attacks.
We also like to get from our research what vulnerabilities are present. Maybe they're all related, maybe not. If they are related, that would be great. So we want to prevent against these smash attacks, the rowhammer, Spectre, Meltdown, to see these vulnerabilities that could hopefully be addressed and fixed. So some current works that we've been looking at, Rowhammer smash mitigation. So as we said earlier, study done in 2021. In that study, they said that DRAM technology actually seems to be getting worse with this Rowhammer attack. So we might have to take a different approach at mitigation.
And as well as actually when it comes to the meltdown memory, that the only defense mechanism they have, there's multiple articles of different types. There's one that we got very interested in that is called Kaiser defense mechanism. And what it does is that it utilizes a trampoline function. We're going to dive more into that on the presentation when it comes to the research. And when it comes to Spectre, there's multiple different ones as well. We are actually going to go in and concentrate on Spectre Guard as well as Spec Fustiker, weird name, but they created it. And go more in depth as far as the solution and to see if they actually have a common source, if they have a common way to defend against these type of attacks and preventing it from reoccurring if they actually consistently, the attacker wants to do this over and over again.
So here's our little schedule that we have planned out. This week, we worked on the proposal and we presented. Next week, we're going to gather info and research. We're going to look into all these articles we just talked about, get more research on them, compile stuff. Week after that, we're going to get a first draft going. And then after that, we're going to work on our presentation and then our final draft. And then we're going to research our presentation and then it's presentation week. So for the conclusion, pretty much our goal at hand is just to research and create a literature review on hardware security and memory technology that addresses all these security concerns from the attacks such as Rowhammer, Smash, Meltdown, Spectre, and the Trojan attacks in SRAM. Here's some references of the articles that we used. And do you guys have any questions?
I have a question about the Rowhammer.
Yeah.
What's the worst case? Like, will it just make my DRAM chip like useless?
Well, like I said, I could actually maybe go back to, actually I don't have it in the slides, but the Rowhammer attack could actually, so what it basically does from what my basic research is on it, you could target, so like you have memory cells and you could target the memory cells right next to the memory cell that you want to target. So you keep on going, addressing them, you keep going on it, and energy could actually start to leak from those capacitors and it could cause bit flips. And if bit flips happen, you could actually gain root access. You could take control of someone's whole computer from this attack.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty serious.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks for the question. Any other questions?
Yeah, and then yeah, I got a question. So these Meltdown and Spectre, they happen through software initially, right?
Yes, it happens through software initially, and as well as Meltdown, they create a rogue application to send it directly to your computer. Spectre, the thing that makes it dangerous, they can do it through the software, through the browser, and destroy you through the browser itself.
And do you have any information of what would happen? You ever heard about plunder vaulting?
What was that?
Plunder vaulting?
No, I haven't.
No, I have not.
Undervaulting is also another word.
Undervaulting, cool.
What if you were able to get physical access to a computer and then do it from there? And then like there is something called plunder vaulting, and then by gaining physical access to the computer, you're gonna physically affect the voltages in the CPU and also gain access that way.
Well, I'm not gonna act and say that I know exactly that particular attack itself by directly having in hand the computer itself and doing the particular attack that you're trying to implement yourself, as far as what you're saying. And to relate it to, let's say, Spectre and as well as Meltdown, the main reason why it's so dangerous is that the second that it is implemented, that memory completely is leaked, and it goes, anything that is stored in that memory, in that process is going to go directly to wherever the attacker is located, and it's going to leave you as a ghost. That's why the symbol of Spectre is basically like a ghost. a trolling ghost. So that's basically what it would be. Your computer becomes basically dead. And through that, they can actually practically shut down your computer. Your computer completely becomes useless. That's what makes hardware security very very important in this case. Hardware security, there's not that many defense against it, because the second an attacker directly affects your hardware, your computer practically is gone. And you could technically relate it to, like, let's say for an example, like a kind of like a credit card. You know how it has chips and it has like an encryption key. So nowadays you could use the tap. That's another form of an encryption key. So then if for whatever reason you lose that card, you have sometimes seconds, to cancel that card. If not, someone's going to use it and destroy it. We can go as far as, let's say, Wireshark, for an example, like what the professor has been showing us. And I'm not going to say someone's smart enough to use a credit card next to someone having a computer, and then they'll take your IP, and then that's it, it's game over. They have your connection, they have all your transactions, they can just pretend to be you. So these attacks, as far as hardware security, they're very vital. But only thing is, not that many defense are out there as of yet. That's what we're gonna research and give you guys more of a better answer, as far as more in-depth answer, as far as when it comes to these 4 topics we're gonna try. There's way too many out there.
Any other questions? All right.
Thumbs up.
Thanks so much, guys. Next
Thank you.
presenter. Password encryption techniques. You could go whenever you guys are ready.
Okay, great. Just let me share screen.
You're good.
There we go. No, not that.
We got the same theme. That's funny.
Yeah, you guys have good taste in layout. All right, I just want to get recording on this end. Okay, welcome. This presentation is on password encryption techniques. This will be both a literature review of different ways passwords are encrypted and potentially attacked, as well as a case study, which will be discussed at a later point, as kind of an example of how both passwords are encrypted and attacked. As a preliminary, I'll discuss some ways that passwords are encrypted and the most common ways that they're hacked by hackers. And for the purposes of this presentation, the main focus of the ways that passwords are going to be encrypted and attacked are in ways that are meant to protect passwords from attackers that don't have direct influence or communication with the victim. This will be focused on kind of like third party, just not directly being associated, so like not phishing attempts per se, but other ways that just anybody can try to attack certain passwords. The definition of encryption itself, which is a very broad term, typically involves a encryption algorithm that turns a password into a garbled mess before it's transferred or sent to a database, where it's then decrypted on the other end using a key, and then referenced and checked before sending that personal data that is then encrypted on their end, sent back to you, decrypted, so forth. One of the most common ways that passwords are encrypted is by using what's known as a hash function. Some popular functions are called SHA-256 and SHA-1. And basically what these functions do is that they take the plain text of the password. So, say your plain text password that you enter into a website, or your banking information is like 1234. It's passed through this function, and then based off of the function that it's used, it turns into just a very, very long string. It's a fixed character length based off of the function that it's used, but it turns it into just a random string so that if somebody like per se uses a Wireshark or tries to see what information is being sent, the hacker doesn't have any really valuable information to go off of. I'll discuss this in the ways that that passwords are attacked, but one thing that's used to kind of counter these hashing protocols is that hackers will use a thing called a rainbow table, which will take like a huge table of commonly used hashing functions, and they'll see if and they'll kind of reverse engineer the password and see if they can get something that looks like a password that somebody would use. And if they know that, and the thing is, if they know that hashing function, and if it's not salted, then they don't just have your password, they have like everybody's password that uses that hashing function, like for that particular thing. May it be a particular bank or a particular database that people use, which makes it very, very scary. And salting is basically in addition to hashing, salting hash browns. And it's basically when you sprinkle in just a little bit of random text that's used by a random number generator. That's just kind of sprinkled into the hashing function. So that way the garbled mess at the end of the hashing function is always unique, and it makes it very hard for people to use those kind of reverse engineering tables to figure it out, because they won't be able to find that specific function that they're using. These are the most common ways that attackers like independently attack databases and individual accounts of people. It doesn't, all of them except for the key logging deals with not being directly interfaced with the victim. So brute force and dictionary are very similar. It basically involves just an attacker brute forcing their way through it by typically it's done through a piece of software that just constantly tries different combinations of numbers and letters and just characters until they get something that works. But these are typically thwarted through like password attempts on a website, or things of that nature. And the dictionary attack can be countered by entering in special characters or things of that nature at the end of your passwords. Rainbow table attack is what I discussed in the previous slide. That's meant to be used against just hashing functions if it's not salted, where they just try to reverse engineer the way that a certain password is hashed. And again, like those can be very effective and can compromise entire databases and systems. So like when you hear for the second time this week that like a huge database leak has happened, that's kind of typically what happens. Someone like some hacker got lucky and found the hash function that's used throughout an entire database in a multitude of people's passwords and information are leaked out. Key logging I wanted to discuss a little bit because it is independent of interfacing with the victim directly in phishing attempts, but it does require the victim to download a piece of information with some malware or with a software program on it. And basically what key logging is that it's a program that runs in the background of a victim's computer or device and keeps a text file with all of the keystrokes that the victim does. And after a certain period of time, this log is sent to the attacker, and then they can read and kind of infer like, okay, this person looked up their bank right here, so kind of goes to show that this and this is probably their username and password. And if it works, then they have direct access to either your login for information for your bank or anywhere else that you store sensitive information. I'll hand it off to Jocelyn for the next slide.
It's really important to understand about encryption and decryption, especially nowadays, since every information is stored online, from bank information, especially personal information from social medias. And we know that the only thing that protects our information simply is a password, aside from biometrics and like the fingerprints, because not all social media have that nowadays. And to understand how passwords are chosen, we need to also understand how password should how passwords are being kept, which was briefly talked with by Alex. So when we log in or we create an account in a website, we do input our password, and then like Alex mentioned, it's first converted by a hash function, which is specifically formulated by the website. And these password will be scrambled and stored by the receiver end, or where they store all the data of all the users' password, and it can be decrypted to come to show the password that we inputted. And this is really important to know, so that from the client base, we know what type of password we should use and what examples of password we shouldn't use. So like there's a lot of different softwares that can prevent hackers from hacking your password, but from the client base, it's really important to put password that's of course not common words, or contains any information about your last name or your birthday, or simple password like just numbers. And a good example of password would be using an acronym like shown in the presentation, the PWRD for account Facebook, which is just an acronym for password for Facebook, which is really simple, or just simply using those better examples of password that maybe you've used, and adding and incorporating more shortcuts, just so that the hackers have more difficult time trying to crack or guess your password. Next slide.
Oh, sorry.
As discussed by Alex again, that we talked about how passwords are being attacked, and the four attack methods that we're going to discuss would be the brute force attack, the dictionary attack, the rainbow table attack, and a little bit about the keylogger. An old way of cracking password involves the hacker momentarily disconnecting a connected device from the network, and basically trying to access that weak point to access encrypted password or data that was already kept in the website. And this is done by sending packets. And when these authorized users are being momentarily disconnected, this process is called like jamming network, and it is more difficult for the hacker to hack password, just because as soon as the authorized user gets connected and they get disconnected, they easily detect like there is a user trying to infrastructure the network because they get disconnected. Therefore, since the technology nowadays are improving rapidly, hackers now use different types of software such as Hashcats or Hex tool to crack password. The Hashcat software, it helps hackers find network that contains weak password easily. And for the Hex tool, it captures information that from a network, so that the hacker can use brute forcing to access weak points. And as discussed from the previous slide that I said, one of the objectives that can be simply improved from the client space would be just improving making better choices in picking the password. So turning all your bad password into good password. And of course, like some preventions would be not writing down your password or not sharing these passwords because these are confidential to you yourself. And maybe simply downloading a software or any apps that can use password manager. Now I'm going to give it to Brian.
All right, so I work with a guy named Frank Chetro. He has a master's degree in cybersecurity engineering from USF. He wrote these two programs that show the first one is the Code Cracker program. It shows the ease of how somebody can get your TCP report and then therefore monitor any keystrokes that you make after logging into that website. And then it does an algorithm to determine what your password is. So the solution to this, to stop this, is to create a password manager program. And what it does is it's a third-party software that sits on your computer. You log into it. It is AES 256 encrypted just for that password alone. Then once you've logged into it, you create your account, you get in, you will then add anything you want. Like if you want your bank account, your email, anyone, it adds it into it and it creates a specific password for that particular site. And that type of encryption is done by SHA 256 with salt added into it. The salt is basically there to prevent collisions happening inside the password algorithm as it's making it. This software allows you to, say you delete an email, you can remove it. So therefore, it's no longer on the system because it is very limited at this now. This is the newer type of software that has been created. He's still developing it as we speak. Next slide. So this is our schedule that we've set up. So as we're doing the proposal with research material right now, then we're going to start working on our first draft, finalize our presentation, and then present all of our documents toward the end of the semester. So in conclusion, we've talked about, we have encryption techniques. We have methods of attack that we can use that will show how everybody can get there. And then programs, two programs that we had to prevent that basically enforce what we were talking about earlier.
And as references, we can take questions now. And thank you for listening.
So on password encryption, I know you talked about SHA-256 and SHA-1. I actually used SHA-256 for a project recently. And I was curious on if you guys know anything and what's the differences between those two.
They both use the same basic way of going about it. It's just got a little nuance, the difference between them, that I'll actually look into a bit more as the project goes forward. But they both essentially perform the same action to varying degrees of security.
I hear you. Thanks. Does anyone else have a question? Because I actually have another one.
Yeah, sure, you can
Go ahead, man.
For the password code cracker program that Frank was working on. So the password manager is to mitigate those keylogger strokes, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
You have like a URL or something I can download that program from?
I would actually have to get the program from him, but he did state if anybody is interested, he can get it set up. That was actually also in his final presentation on one of his slides, that if anybody wanted it, he would gladly give it because he wants everybody to have it. He's really passionate about this. I spent maybe 8 hours at my work, me and him talking about different forms of cybersecurity.
Nice. Okay.
Anyone else have questions? All right. I think all the presenters did well. Round of applause
Good job,
for
guys.
everyone.
Yay.
Great job, guys. All right.
Thank
So
you,
I think,
everyone.
I think we could go to the regular room to get like checked off.
I'm gonna stop my recording then.
Yeah.